Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining me today. I'm going to start this week with a reminder about the all-important U.S. Census. The response numbers this week are 72% of county households have responded, and 63% of those households are within the city of Erie. The 2010 census, as you know, is tied to funding that comes to our community, most particularly at this moment to the COVID-19 relief funds that we have received as Erie County CARES money. An accurate count ensures that we get our fair share of funding going into the future. It's truly important for people to respond today at my2020census.gov or 1-844-330-2020 to ensure that you're counted before the deadline, which is only 4 weeks away at the end of September. Representatives from the Census Bureau are out, and they were out just recently at the Erie Free Store during the past 2 open Mondays. During that time, families that represented 10 people and another family that represented 12 people, respectively, were counted into the census by the Bureau staff. So if you're a local nonprofit organization and you'd like a census worker to come to something you have at your location, you can contact Michelle Jaggi at 814-323-0475. That's Michelle Jaggi at 814-323-0475. And speaking of our CARES Act funding, the applications opened this Monday at 8 a.m. at our website, eriecountypa.gov. Funding for municipal reimbursement program, the nonprofit grant program, the personal protection equipment for small businesses program, and the small business assistant grant program all opened this past Monday. And I'm already hearing that there's a large volume of applications coming in. So I'm encouraging our businesses and our nonprofits to act quickly so that you hopefully can get access to some of this funding. If you are a nonprofit, I encourage you to attend the Erie County CARES Nonprofit Assistant Grant Information session via Zoom tomorrow. That's September 3rd at 4 p.m. And more details about that Zoom meeting can be found at eriecountypa.gov. Now for our update on COVID-19 cases here in Erie County. Today we have 11 new cases to report, which brings us to a total of 1,369 cumulative positive cases since March. 81 of those cases are currently active, that means 1,241 are recovered to date, and we have 23,498 negatives, and unfortunately 47 deaths reported in the NEDS database. Of the cumulative cases in Erie County, 58% are female and 48% are male. The breakdown of the total cases by age as of September 1st are 3% ages 0 to 4, 2% ages 5 to 9, 6% ages 10 to 18, 15% ages 19 to 24, 37 ages 25 to 49, 18 ages 50 to 64, and 19% are 65 or older. Please note that the percentage values may not always come up to 100 due to rounding. Regarding race and ethnicity of our cumulative cases, 61% are white residents, 21% are African American Black residents, 8% are Asian residents, 2% other, and 8% are unknown. Regarding Hispanic origin, 7% are Hispanic of any race, with 82% non-Hispanic and 10% unknown. The gender and race report that you're seeing up on the screen can now be found at eriecountypa.gov by clicking on cases on the COVID-19 page. Also on this page, you'll find we've added back the cumulative case map by zone, which was last updated on August 31st. And now I'd like to mention a few of our star players when it comes to our businesses in our community. First is the Beauty Bar. They are operating by appointments only. Everyone is required to wear a mask. They are taking a temperature screening, and they have a questionnaire upon your arrival, and the questionnaire includes questions for both the client and the stylist's safety. such as if you were diagnosed within the last 14 days as having COVID-19, will you let your stylist know? Next is Mazza Vineyards, Heritage Wine Cellars, and Lakeview Wine Cellars. Masks are required, and they have outdoor seating available for you, personalized tasting flights served with charcuterie or other food items. So thank you to all of our businesses who are doing so much and are so diligent trying to keep our community safe by following the guidelines set forth. And now I want to invite a new guest I have on today with us, Dan Lowenheim. He's an emergency management specialist at the Erie County Department of Public Safety and Planning Section Chief under our incident command structure for the COVID-19 pandemic. And he will share an update on what's happening with the Erie County Department of Health's strike team, as we like to refer to it, or the teams that have been going out to visit our schools prior to school openings. Dan?
Thank you, County Executive. It's great to be joining you this afternoon to discuss the Erie County Department of Health strike team. I would like to begin by briefly explaining the objective, mission, and composition of the strike team for our viewers. Our unified command leadership called for the development and the implementation of the strike team to support the continuing objective of assisting the Erie County academic community with their COVID-19 reopening planning process. The mission of the strike team is twofold: to provide a space for open dialogue with our schools and county government in regards to the school reopening planning process, and we hope to continue this open dialogue extending far beyond their reopening dates. Number two, to support and assist our educational facilities with operationalizing their written health and safety plan procedures. The strike team is comprised of Erie County Department of Health personnel, Erie County Department of Public Safety's emergency management personnel, and the local emergency management coordinator for the school's geographic jurisdiction, which then all join with the school's pandemic coordinator, school administrators, and the other school officials that bring together a unity of effort to accomplish the mission. With this understanding of mission and composition, I would like to briefly explain the two parts of the strike team deployment. Part one is the meeting. Following introductions, a meeting takes place in which a review of the school's health and safety plan occurs, followed by a review of the plan's procedures, and concludes with a review and discussion of the current guidance from CDC, Pennsylvania Department of Health, and the Pennsylvania Department of Education. Then we move on to part two, which is the walkthrough tour. The walkthrough tour consists of a tour of 1 to 2 buildings, just due to time constraints of everybody's time, and can occur in one of two ways. A building with a smaller footprint, we can conduct a walkthrough of the majority of the rooms. And for other buildings that have larger footprints, the second way we can do this is conduct a walkthrough that follows a typical school day for a student. That also then includes offices like the nurse's office, isolation rooms, gymnasiums, auditoriums, music rooms, cafeterias, etc. During the walkthrough tour, the school officials have an opportunity to highlight all of their mitigation efforts, and the strike team has an opportunity to provide additional suggestions and considerations. The strike team deployment then concludes with providing a written copy of the strike team's suggestions and recommendations to school officials. With that, I would like to turn this back over to the county executive. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. And Dan will be available for questions today, along with David George, also from the Health Department's environmental team. And I'm just really proud of the incident command and the work that each branch is doing in Erie County to slow the spread of COVID-19. You need to know that there's a great collaborative effort that has gone on throughout county government, and this is an example of one. So the department, working together with the health systems, have also come up with another project, and this is community centers to provide testing and assistance. We have seen great results so far, and our reasonably low case numbers demonstrate the effectiveness of these partnerships. So we want to thank our partners, which include the health systems and the community centers, working hand in hand with the Department of Health individuals to really comprehensively come together and address the testing that needs to happen in our community. And now, as I said, myself, Dan Lowenheim, and David George are available for questions. So we will open up to the media, and we'll start today with the Erie Times News.
Hi, Kathy. It's David. Have you gotten any reports of outbreaks at high schools since they've opened? Not just high schools, but grade schools, or have there been sporadic cases? What have you heard since schools have reopened?
I myself have not heard of any outbreaks within any of our schools locally, our K through 12, or even our colleges. But I'm going to ask David George if he's heard anything different. David?
There's no outbreaks that I'm aware of at any of the schools, grades K through 12 throughout the county. We have been working closely with the schools on a few very small isolated incidents, but we've kept everything under control, and we're working closely with them to do all the right things.
And David, when you say isolated incidents, meaning like isolated cases?
Yeah, just one.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, David. Erie News Now? Erie News Now, are you with us?
I am, yes. I'm sorry. A question for you about evictions. Now that the state moratorium has been lifted, but we see the CDC saying that evictions cannot continue, what are you hearing will be the county's role in all of that? Because we're seeing further south here in Allegheny County that courts are still playing a role. So could county courts still play a role in this whole eviction saga?
Well, they certainly could, and I don't think we've obviously heard the end of this, but there are concerns on both sides of this. And to that end, of course, our landlords, many of them, for some of them, this is their only business, and it's their source of income. And then on the other side, you've got the renter who maybe has lost their job or has had a greatly reduced income due to maybe one of the breadwinners losing their job. And so my advice to everyone out there who's running into this situation is to have a conversation with your landlord. I think it all has to start there, and work with the landlord on what you can do. And hopefully most landlords will be understanding of that, and you could find a way to compromise. But there's also ability to go out and get some funding through actually COVID-19 relief funds, the CARES Act dollars, and you can find that information at the Pennsylvania Housing and Finance Agency's website. But these applications for assistance that then would help you pay your bills for rent have to be submitted by September 30th. So that's not far off, but you can visit the phfa.org/PACares/rent.aspx for more information for eligibility requirements. And then, of course, there's additional information on there about other programs. There's also the Pennsylvania Housing Assistance Program. This is really targeted at populations of homeless and assist with their security deposit and a first month's rent, versus the other program is there to assist with kind of ongoing rent during this pandemic. So there is help, but you can also call 814-SHELTER, and you can find out about the help that is available. But I really think that this issue of eviction is difficult for so many reasons, but the biggest concern when it comes to the pandemic is that people now will have to be moved out of their homes, may have to go to a shelter and be around a lot more people, or move into a house with other people, and now instead of maybe a few people living in a home, there would be quite a few people living in a home. And of course, the more people that you put in a confined situation, the more dangerous it is for the spread of COVID-19. So we'll see where this goes, but I am glad that there is, at the current point, at least a moratorium on evictions. But again, I do think that everyone should reach out to their landlord. Don't let this go forward without having that kind of conversation.
So that is your current understanding then here in Erie County, even if a landlord had filed to evict you yesterday when the moratorium ended, that is on hold, or that the state moratorium ended. You're hearing that is on hold. That's your understanding that those can't move forward here in Erie County.
Well, again, I think all of this is sort of evolving in kind of current time, and so I'm not exactly sure, and I haven't had a chance to speak to anyone in the courts about this. But again, there's a lot of moving parts around this right now, and I'm sure for anyone who's in this situation, it can be a very worrisome time. So make those phone calls, get on the websites, see what kind of help you can get. But first of all, talk to your landlord.
Thanks so much.
Sure. Talk Erie.
Yes, good afternoon, ma'am. It's Joel Natale. I wanted to ask about a conversation I had with Dr. Howard Nadworny, again, an email exchange regarding the numbers coming out of the wastewater testing. Those are not moving, yet our testing numbers for the PCR tests are coming down, and it seems like the volume of testing is coming down. Are we doing all we can to make sure that we are trying to find this virus through aggressive testing?
I've always said, Joel, that we need more testing in this community and in our country as a whole. And so I'm not an expert when it comes to these sewage numbers, as is Dr. Howard Nadworny's sort of area that he's been promoting and following. But the concern has always been, are we really finding the virus? I can tell you that we did some testing at one of the neighborhood centers this week. I shouldn't say we, it was done through our partnerships with the health networks, Allegheny Health Network and Martin Luther King, and there's another one going on today at the JFK Center with LECOM, and there'll be one going on with UPMC at Booker T. Washington, and we'd like to see more testing throughout Erie County. And so what we have found, though, when we did these tests the other day, out of I think 96 tests, there was 2 positives. So not a lot, but those were 2 positives that we found that now are isolated, and their contacts have been quarantined, and so we're trying to lock down the virus. And anytime we can do more testing like that, 96 tests in a day in a geographic location, I think it helps us to lock down the virus.
Do we have any anecdotal evidence of how long it's taking to get these tests back? That seems to always be the bottleneck, that it takes 2, 3, 4 days or much more than that.
Well, again, sometimes in the past, certain reports were that was taking well over a week and even up to 10 days, which doesn't really help anything at that point, right? So the faster we can get these tests back, and the testing seems to constantly be improving, but right now I'm not hearing of real long delays like we were seeing maybe a month or 2 ago.
Thanks.
Talk Erie, Jet TV.
Hi, Kathy. It's Star. How are you guys giving guidance to high school sports? Today, allegedly, Governor Wolf is lifting spectator restrictions for fall sports. So I just wanted to check in to see if you guys are doing anything in regards to that.
I'm going to have David or Dan address that. Fall sports, I know David's been working around this quite a bit. David, are you with us?
Yep. So, earlier today, Governor Wolf allowed spectators back at the facilities. They're going to be limited to 250 people for outdoor events and 25 people for indoor events. For outdoor events, there can be some spectators at maybe soccer games, but if there's a football game, it includes everyone: officials, coaches, players, staff, personnel. So for any indoor event, that almost limits it to the amount of players. But for outdoor events, there can be some spectators. With football and band, that it might be difficult, but for cross country and soccer, there can probably more likely be some spectators. But so it's fresh. I think that information came out a couple hours ago, so we'll be working with the high schools to try to get a list of the spectators and all the players so they can get their numbers straight.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Back to you, David. Erie Times News.
Sure, Kathy. I want to actually follow up with David a little bit on the sports. So who will be enforcing this? Obviously, I was following my coworker Tom Weidenreber on Twitter with some of his tweets about this. And, is it going to be the school that enforces this, especially for football games? How is this going to be determined to keep folks down to 250, such as, especially if it's in a place where there is a certain games that are a big draw for spectators?
Yeah, I encourage all schools to kind of get an attendance sheet of all the players, coaches, and staff who will be in attendance. Have one entranceway so they can kind of keep account of it, and it'll be up to the pandemic safety coordinator to manage the crowd control. And even better, if they could get in advance, they might have to sell tickets in advance to get a count, so that way you can't get into the game without a tickets. But schools are going to have to get a little creative just so they can meet these deadlines or number requirements.
Thank you.
Thank you. And it's important, I think, to remember that every school, as well as every business, needs to have a pandemic safety officer. And I know that when Dan Lowenheim and his team have gone out, they are dealing not only with the administration, but with that pandemic safety officer. And that is a great resource for all of the schools. We'll now turn it over to Erie News Now.
Hi, a question for either Dan or David. Just about the biggest concern, the biggest hiccup you're seeing as schools either are easing their way back into classes or prepare for that. What are the biggest things you're seeing when the strike team heads out that keep kind of cropping up again in several places?
Dan, do you want to address
Yes,
that?
thank you for that question. First and foremost, I would like to mention that all of our schools really deserve a tremendous amount of recognition for their efforts in adhering to the guidance and all the countless hours of planning that they have undertaken to prepare for their reopening dates. With regards to some challenges that schools are facing, I think it really centers around isolation rooms and contact tracing, as these are not activities that the schools have had to prepare for in the past before COVID-19. So when we go out to these schools, we're really trying to open those discussions up regarding where their isolation rooms are, how they're designed and set up. Are there exits that are close by? Is there a way for staff to monitor students that might be in those spaces? And then also to look at the contact tracing piece. Now, we're looking to have the schools assist with contact tracing by keeping attendance records up to date on classes and movement around the building. So say, for example, cafeteria, having up to date rosters for who would be in a cafeteria, who might be a close contact, things like that. But I think that those are two areas that the schools have not had to have been accustomed to in the past, that they are certainly doing their due diligence during this time period.
And would you talk to me a little bit about, for people who don't know, the points of these isolation rooms and how those are used in schools?
Sure. So the isolation rooms are going to be areas for those students that might be symptomatic based on the COVID-19 symptoms that may not be directly in the exact space of the nurse's office as seen traditionally in the past. And these would be spaces that can be monitored certainly by the nursing personnel of schools, but then keep them separate from students that might be in a nurse's office that say might need an ice pack or something like that. So it cuts down on some of the transmission possibilities there. And while they're in these spaces are many of them are going to have cots in them and things like that, and monitored by the nursing staff. And then certainly at that point, their notification, the nurses' notifications and the school's notifications to parents and families can go on, and therefore, as a result, those students can be picked up and through many opportunities of separate exit way, not have to travel through other hallways of the schools to then be picked up and receive medical care from that point forward.
Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Talk Erie, Joel.
Yes, hi. This question is for David George. David, I'm wondering again about the sports, about the outdoor activities. What science is behind limiting an outdoor gathering to 250, especially in a stadium that could hold between 3,000 and 10,000 people? Why aren't we using the percentages of capacity like we are able to do in many of the indoor spaces like the restaurants and so on?
I think it's just based off of transmission numbers. The smaller amount of people you have together, just worst case scenario, if potentially there was one or maybe two people who tested positive, it won't potentially be spreading throughout the entire stadium. It's in order to try to prevent a super spreader at an event, at a football game, or fans could be cheering, being very vocal, even wearing a mask, that it could lead to increased transmission. But these events like concerts, football games, things of that nature, I think that's the main reason they want to limit it to 250 people on the outdoor arena.
But there is no guidance from the CDC that puts this kind of a limit on these kinds of events, other than the 6 feet apart from people outside your household and wearing the mask. Is that correct?
Yeah, that guidance comes from the Pennsylvania Department of Health. They're specific in any event that takes place is limited to 250 people. I'm not sure if the CDC guidance, I think you're right, they don't have numbers, but we get that number from the state order.
Thanks so much.
Sure. Jet TV, Star?
Yes, any challenges so far with students that are taking the buses or ventilation issues within the school districts?
I'll turn that back over to Dan.
Sure, thank you for that question. So many of the schools are working with their bus drivers to look at a couple of things. So first of all, the guidance that's out there talks about seating back to front, with leaving the front row seat empty, and also looking at opening windows to maximize the airflow. Some of our suggestions in that regard include putting signage in the buses that might be, rather than fine print, picture related, so that students that are sitting in the seats can observe and view the pictured guidance as well. And they're also looking at having a supply of masks on the buses for students that either have a mask that drops or something like that, rips, that there'll be an extra supply of masks on the buses. And then with regards to cleaning, many of the buses are going to be cleaned between runs, things like that. So, and they're certainly limiting the capacity in the seats, and also adding bus runs as need be to accommodate the student population traveling by bus.
Thank you, Dan.
And any challenges with the ventilations within the schools?
So the schools are working with their subject matter experts on things like airflow, percentage of airflow, how many times, say in a class period or a time frame, airflow is exchanged. That is really discussions that are going on between the school officials and their subject matter experts in that realm.
Thank you, Star.
Okay, thank you.
Erie Times News, David.
Yes, Kathy, I want to talk a little bit about trick-or-treating. I know the city of Erie has gotten calls from people wondering if there's going to be trick-or-treating this year. I talked with one of the Mill Creek Township supervisors about it. I know the county isn't a deciding factor on this. Each municipality has to make their own decision. But what's your take on this? Will kids be able to trick-or-treat this Halloween?
Well, for one thing, we know they could all wear a mask, right? I say that a little bit with jest, but it is one of the things that's part of Halloween. But I know we've been getting a lot of calls about trick-or-treating, and I'm going to see if David maybe has something to say about the discussions that have been going on at the health department as we enter September, and Halloween is 2 months away. Go ahead.
Yep, I know we got some time to work on it, but we've had some internal discussions on how to handle Halloween this year, have a specific time frame for trick-or-treating. If you do not want to participate in trick-or-treating, leave your light off. If you are willing to participate in trick-or-treating, to turn it on. Kind of some suggestions are to stay on your door front and see the trick-or-treaters from a distance, and kind of put the candy on a table out front and kind of space it out so all the kids aren't touching all the candy. I, of course, have both the trick-or-treaters and the parents who are passing out the candy wear a mask this year, where if you're a kid, have a costume that involves a mask. And then potentially when you get home, to let that candy sit just as an extra precaution for 2 to 3 days before you go in there, just so if there is any chance of any virus on the candy wrappers, that it'll dissipate over that time, just to be extra safe. But we're still working on that. That's just what we've come up with so far, and we'll work with all the municipalities that ask to develop guidelines best suited for them.
So, David, it sounds like if people follow the right precautions, and I know that's saying a lot, but if people follow the right precautions, it could be a relatively low-risk event, couldn't it?
Definitely recommend only trick-or-treating with members of your household, not getting together with your friends, and maintaining that at least 6 feet of distance. But it's an outdoor activity, and we're still working on it. But I think if the municipalities decide to go forward with their activity, we'll help them as best we can to make it as safe as possible.
Thanks, David.
I guess we'll all be looking for the best mask for our costume this year. But, we want to learn how to continue to live with COVID as part of our current lifestyle. But you have to think about how can you do things very safely. And there will be some people, as was mentioned by David, will not feel comfortable and respect your neighbor if they have their light off and they don't want to participate. There could be various reasons, including their own personal health. Erie News Now.
One last one here for you, County Executive. Biggest concerns going into the Labor Day holiday?
Well, usually when we have a holiday like Labor Day, Memorial Day, Easter, we tend to see a bump. We have had very, very good numbers over the last couple weeks. Fairly low, a number of days in the single digits. We are not seeing outbreaks in our nursing homes as we had a month ago. So we're feeling pretty good about where the numbers are right now. And that's good going into school starting. So I ask everyone as we go into Labor Day weekend to remember those children who are going back to school, because the more we can stop the spread throughout the community, the more we're going to eliminate and hopefully not have spread in our schools, so our kids can stay in school and they can continue learning together with their teachers in a classroom. But it really is up to us as a community and what we do on this holiday weekend, sort of the last blast of summer as we all think of it, and the weather looks lovely. So just do what you've been doing for the last few weeks. Do the right thing, wear your mask, stay socially distant, and hopefully we'll get through Labor Day without a big bump. We normally tend to see maybe a week to 10 days out after a holiday like this. Talk Erie. Joel, do you have a final question?
Yes, just one for you, ma'am. I wanted to ask about the grant process. Is there going to be a committee evaluating these grants, a pecking order? Is it first come, first served? Can you talk a little bit more about how that money is going to be distributed?
Sure. So the grants are open for 2 weeks, and it depends on the grant funding. There'll be recommendations made. For example, in the nonprofit realm, the Department of Human Services, who does a lot of work with a lot of agencies and does a lot of contracting type work. There is a committee that's working on that. But there are parameters we're looking at. First of all, did a nonprofit or did a business already get CARES Act funding versus one that did not get anything yet? Then the ones who didn't get any CARES Act funding would actually go to the top. And so there are parameters we're looking at. We're looking at the population they serve, what their mission is, and does it coincide with what we're trying to do in terms of fighting COVID-19, or the populations that they work with. Are we having more issues in those populations in terms of the spread? So there's a number of different factors that are looked at. We're hopeful that we can maybe fund every application that comes in, but that may not be realistic, knowing that the numbers are probably going to be quite high. But first and foremost, we want to help those entities that didn't get any money at all, either through the PPP program or some of the other programs that are already out there.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. And Jet TV Star, do you have a final question?
Yes, Kathy, just going off the tour or the Labor Day weekend, any worry about additional people coming in for the big last summer kickoff holiday with the additional numbers of people coming up to visit Erie with new amenities? I know we have a new hotel on the bayfront, and Waldemere is going to gear up to close soon, and Presque Isle.
Well, anytime we have the holiday, we're inviting people to come here. That's pretty much a given, especially when you got a beautiful holiday weekend like this one coming up. We've had a lot of visitors up here in Erie County over the summer months. We've seen them on our bayfront. We've seen them at Presque Isle. We've seen them at our other great attractions. And I have to say that the businesses, and I go back to that, in Erie County have done an amazing job of keeping all of us pretty safe, considering the number of people that I believe have come here from other areas. And so if those businesses continue to do the great job of making sure people are wearing masks, socially distanced from each other, surfaces are cleaned, etc., hopefully we can get through this without too much of an issue. But I guess I'd also like to address the people who live in Erie County who might think I should go somewhere else. Stay home. Spend your money here, have a staycation over this holiday weekend and help our local businesses versus taking your money elsewhere. We depend on all of you to help spend money here and help our community get through this together. Thank you. Well, thank you all to the media. Thank you very much to my two guests today, Dan Lowenheim and David George, doing fantastic work along with their teams out in our community, helping our schools. So important right now, just helping our schools to navigate this very unusual school year. So I want to thank them, and I want to thank all of you for continuing to help all of us really stop the spread of COVID-19 and deal with this pandemic. So remember, when you're out and about, especially as you get into this holiday weekend, to stay physically distant from people that you don't live with, to always wear your mask. More and more research is showing masks truly do work in stopping the spread of COVID-19. Clean surfaces, use good personal hygiene. Whenever you can't wash your hands, have your hand sanitizer there handy. And remember, as you go through this time and this holiday weekend, to, again, stay as close to home as you can, stay safe throughout this time, and please always remember to stay calm. Thank you.